What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. So this weekend, there's a lot of different directions I can go in terms of stuff I'm going to cover or try to cover. I don't know. The course hasn't quite plotted it out yet, but there were definitely a couple that I wanted to cover because I'd covered these bands before, and this is one of those bands. So today we're going to go over the latest offering from Wode, Uncrossing the Keys. This also comes out on the 3rd of October on 20 Buck Spin Records. This band formed in 2011 in the UK. This is their 4th album overall. We went over their last album, Burn in Many Mirrors, and honestly, it was a year-ender for me, I believe, in 2021. While a lot of their earlier stuff, I believe, was considered more just straight black metal, this was definitely more blackened death metal. It had a good mix of, just big, heavy death metal riffs, but a lot of black metal atmosphere, and also elements of like heavy metal and goth rock kind of woven in there too. And I think with this album, they've started to push more into like blackened heavy metal territory / blackened goth rock. I'll be honest, this album sounds a hell of a lot like earlier Tribulation. Production-wise, this is vastly different than the last one. The last one had, a pretty heavy, solid sound. Like the guitars were very prominent. They had a good chunky, kind of like, almost like death metal crunch, but again, they had enough like that kind of like shimmering, dirty, kind of tinny sound to give it like a little bit of a black metal sound too. The guitars feel decidedly warmer, and I wouldn't call them like clean, but they don't have like this big metallic sound. It's honestly more of like a classic heavy metal / like proto metal sound. Like this tone is maybe slightly beefier than like say like Thin Lizzy or Budgie or like really early Iron Maiden. In fact, there's a lot of stuff on here that kind of reminds me of like Killer's era Iron Maiden. The opening track, Two Cross Keys, comes in with D beats, a lot of punky energy, but as a lot of these songs will do, they'll shift into these fun bridges with really solid guitar harmonies. Granted, they have like a more like gothic tinge to them. They reek of just like old school classic heavy metal with just a blackened overtone to it, especially with the vocals. The vocals are cavernous and ghoulish and very prominent and right out in front, and probably like the coldest thing about this production, because honestly, a lot of the production here just has kind of, again, like a classic warmth to it. Like the bass on here, very warm tone overall. The drums don't sound hyper compressed or too thin. Again, a lot of this I would compare to Tribulation. Maybe not so much like the last Tribulation album, but definitely albums like Down Below or Where the Gloom Becomes Sound. Like it has that sort of sound, like these shimmering guitars. They're playing heavier riffs, but again, it's not about like the volume and like the aggression behind it. It's about creating this like, very just dark, kind of like foggy, musty atmosphere. This whole album sounds like it was recorded in a fucking dungeon. And as the album goes on, like the riff changes and the mixing of like different styles in here gets way more dramatic, way more pronounced. Transmutation, Saturn Shadow. You'll go from like gothic synths layering out like doom riffs to like occult rock. There's also moments where I'd say there's like post-punk or post-hardcore, like kind of like snarliness to some of these songs, like Killing Joke, I would say like Helmet, Therapy at certain points. This album's heaviness isn't always like purely a like metallic heaviness, especially with this guitar tone, which again, I wouldn't describe as like fiercely, aggressively metallic. There's a lot in here that leans more towards like a more like punk or goth rock style of heaviness overall than say like flat out metal. But when it does lean into like some more like metallic tropes, they do them really well. Lash of the Tyrant, I think, might be one of my favorite songs this band has done, or at least, favorite in terms of ones that I've heard by this band. The song is big, epic, dynamic as hell, lots of clever riff changes throughout this entire song, and just like solid songwriting and song building. The opening of the song has these bright, shimmering, ascending melodies. Weirdly enough, somehow it reminded me of The Dark Crystal. There's something about maybe like the main theme of that movie and these melodies that somewhere in there, my childhood interlocked with this album. Weirder things have happened while I've listened to music. Anyway, the song transitions into like these ghostly, kind of like clean, shimmering melodies with this sort of like drunken swagger of an off-time rhythm in terms of the drums. And honestly, it kind of sounded a lot like Mastodon's Circa Leviathan. It kind of has this weird sway to it. It feels like you're maybe on a boat trying to hunt a whale, maybe not, or maybe so. These riffs, these melodies reminded me a lot of, Sea Beast or like Megalodon. They're kind of like, I don't know, undulating and moving around and these dark currents of the song. And that song goes kind of all over the place. There are moments where it is very distant and cold and very dark and bleak sounding. There are other points where it gets more blasty and aggressive. Again, I think it's the most dynamic song on the album. Dashed on the Rocks, too, I think is also a big standout in here because I would say it's one of the heaviest songs of the album. And it kind of brings back what I think was kind of missing on here, which were some of the death metal elements. It's a very light seasoning of death metal, like just some blasts and some like deeper tremolo riffs, but it gives this album a heavier dimension that it doesn't necessarily have, at least in comparison to the last one. A lot of the heaviness on here is more rooted in black metal, like the vocals, the guitar tone, when it does get into like some heavier spots, the tremolos and some of the more aggressive riffs come across as a little bit more black metal than death metal. But I'll say what did carry over from the last album is a lot of the riff work. This is very riffy, I guess we call it riffy black metal. Like that's kind of the wheelhouse that I like in terms of black metal. This has like a lot of those frequent riff changes. They still sound cold, they still sound dark and menacing, and touches of heavy metal harmonies and such to kind of give it a little bit of a fluctuating atmosphere, so it's not all dark and dismal all the time. Like there's just like some flat out solid rock and hooks on here where you can just headbang. In terms of like big negatives on here, I suppose maybe the biggest one is I do miss the death metal aspects of this band sound, or at least the aspects that showed up on Burn of Many Mirrors. This album does not have that kind of heft to it at all. It's still heavy, it's still got good solid riffs in it, but the production change definitely favors like a more atmospheric sound overall. Conversely, I would argue though that this maybe doesn't need like a hefty death metal tone because they're not playing a lot of death metal. A lot of this, again, is rooted in like classic heavy metal and black metal. You don't need the biggest, heaviest tone for that. And even when this album gets more aggressive, it's not like a death metal aggression. So again, maybe it's not really needed. I will also say that I think the vocals do get a little bit monotonous, like it's one uniform roar pretty much across the entire album. And they are very out front as well as just completely drenched in reverb. Granted, it adds a lot of atmosphere, like that's kind of the main thing that gives it this very dungeony, cavernous sound. And they are very dramatic at times, but I do feel like it's kind of a uniform roar. And at least on the last album, the guitars, I think, had a little bit more prominence, and you kind of just like, all right, well, the vocals are just kind of like blending in with the music and kind of giving it the appropriate atmosphere. I feel like the vocals are maybe like a little too exposed on here, and they kind of pushed them in the back a bit. And, I'm not saying like make the guitars like super heavy, but maybe just kind of raise them up in the mix. I think that probably would have balanced it out for me. But overall, I thought this was pretty solid. It is definitely different than the last one and maybe not what I was expecting, but it's still executed really well. And again, I love my black metal riffy, and this definitely kind of falls right in there. So overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. It was kind of bordering out of 4, but I don't know. I'm going to give this some more listens. I'm definitely going to order this one. I've really enjoyed everything that I've listened to by this band so far. And this is definitely a different side of them, at least in comparison to their last album. I think the death metal aspects have been dialed back to the point where they're really not there anymore. But in its place, you still get great classic heavy metal riffs mixed with like black metal energy. The atmosphere is dark, dingy. It sounds sinister at all times. There's some like fun punky D-beat sections that open it up and kind of make it sound a little bit more rowdy, like the faster sections you'd hear in like Celtic Frost songs or Triptychon. But the strength of this album really lies in its riff work. The riff work in here, I think, is really awesome. Tons of clever harmonies, really great transitions. They mix it up pretty well in terms of different styles in here. Like they're not just aping like classic Iron Maiden riffs and harmonies the entire time. They definitely have like a broader palette. Again, I heard some like post-punk elements in here. There's some Mastodon-esque stuff too. Lash of the Tyrant in particular, probably my favorite song in here, but I dug pretty much every single track on here. But yeah, if you love bands like Tribulation, Devil Master, I would say like at points like some of the riffy era of Dark Throne, Celtic Frost, and again occasionally some stuff in here that sounds like Mastodon, Killing Joke, maybe even Therapy too. Check this out. This was a pretty solid listen. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They were only 99 cents. Our lone perk is doing a members only live stream, which we will do at some point this month. We will probably alert you in the comments or the community section here. We haven't picked out a date. We still got a lot of stuff we're getting through. Shred has got some family stuff again. And we'll see how Jammin' John recovers from, again, like a lot of dental surgery. You'll see when he gets on here. We definitely want to give him some time to heal up because, it was pretty fucking extensive. But memberships are the main way to support the channel. And if you would like to join up, there's a join button down there for you to punch, headbutt, I don't know. You can do whatever the hell you want to it. I won't tell anyone. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. Once again, this is going to be my weekend of reviews just because everyone else has got some stuff going on. But I'm also working on some other stuff too, bringing back some content that I hadn't done in a while. And of course, this month is just absolutely loaded with releases. So when everyone else is back together, we're going to have some big ones for you. Either way, thank you guys for every bit of support you guys have ever given us. It has been an amazing journey, and it's hard to believe we're still going. But a lot of that drive and determination is thanks to you guys. You guys keep us going, and we appreciate the living shit out of that. So one more big thank you, and we will catch you later.